The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Private Marcus Thompson adjusted his iconic red tunic and straightened his bearskin hat. At 24 years old, he had served as one of the Queen's guards for 3 years, a position he held with immense pride and unwavering dedication. The weight of tradition rested on his shoulders, along with the heavy wool uniform that had remained unchanged for centuries. Marcus came from a military family in Yorkshire. His grandfather had served in World War II, his father in the Falklands, and now he continued the family legacy in the most prestigious ceremonial unit in the British Army. Every morning he reminded himself of the sacred oath he had taken to protect the crown and maintain the dignity of his position, no matter what challenges might arise. The palace grounds buzzed with their usual activity. Tourists gathered behind the ornate iron gates, cameras ready to capture the famous guards in their motionless stance. Marcus had grown accustomed to the constant attention, the flash of cameras and the whispered comments from visitors amazed by their discipline. Children would wave, adults would pose for photos, and occasionally someone would try to make them laugh or break their composure. But Marcus and his fellow guards remained as still as statues, their eyes fixed straight ahead. Today felt different somehow. There was an unusual tension in the air that Marcus couldn't quite identify. The morning briefing had been longer than usual, with the sergeant major emphasizing the importance of following protocol without exception. Several high-ranking military officials were expected to visit throughout the day, and any deviation from standard procedure would reflect poorly on the entire unit. As Marcus took his position at the main entrance, he noticed increased activity among the palace staff. Security personnel moved with heightened alertness, and there seemed to be more officials than usual walking the corridors. The usual peaceful atmosphere of the morning shift had been replaced by an underlying current of anticipation. His training had prepared him for various scenarios. The Queen's Guards were not merely ceremonial figures, but active soldiers trained in combat, security protocols, and emergency procedures. They were taught to assess threats, protect the royal family, and maintain order while never breaking from their stoic demeanor. The famous phrase, "Don't make them laugh," that tourists often heard was just the beginning of their extensive responsibilities. Marcus reflected on his journey to this position. The selection process had been rigorous, involving physical fitness, tests, psychological evaluations, and extensive background checks. Only the most disciplined and dedicated soldiers were chosen to serve in this elite unit. The training had been intense, focusing not only on military skills but also on etiquette, protocol, and the historical significance of their role. The red tunic he wore was more than just a uniform. It was a symbol of British heritage and royal tradition. Every button, every piece of brass, every element of his appearance was maintained to perfection. His rifle, though ceremonial in this context, was kept in pristine condition, and he was fully trained in its use. The bearskin hat, standing 18 inches tall, had its own history and significance dating back to the Battle of Waterloo. As the morning progressed, Marcus maintained his position with the discipline that had become second nature. His breathing was controlled, his posture perfect, and his awareness sharp despite his motionless appearance. He could hear the conversations of tourists, the footsteps of staff members, and the distant sounds of London traffic beyond the palace walls. The other guards shared his commitment. They communicated through subtle signals when necessary, always maintaining their professional appearance while staying alert to their surroundings. Each man knew that he represented not only himself and his unit but the entire British military and the crown itself. Marcus thought about the stories his grandfather had told him about military service, about honor, duty, and the importance of following orders without question. These values had been instilled in him from childhood and had guided his decision to pursue a military career. Serving as a Queen's Guard was the pinnacle of ceremonial military service, a position that required not only physical and mental strength, but also an unwavering commitment to tradition and protocol. The weight of responsibility was something Marcus carried gladly. Every day brought new challenges, whether dealing with unruly tourists, maintaining composure in adverse weather conditions, or handling the countless unpredictable situations that could arise in such a public position. His training had prepared him for standard procedures, But real-life service often presented scenarios that required quick thinking within the strict boundaries of protocol. As midday approached, Marcus noticed an increase in military vehicles arriving at the palace. Staff members moved with greater urgency, and there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere around the grounds. Something significant was happening, though from his position, he could only observe and remain ready for whatever might come next. The commitment required of a Queen's Guard extended beyond the hours of duty. Their entire lives were subject to scrutiny. Their behavior both on and off duty reflected on the unit, and their dedication to service had to be absolute. Marcus had willingly accepted these demands because he understood the honor and privilege of his position. Standing there in the growing warmth of the day, Marcus embodied centuries of British military tradition. His presence, along with his fellow guards, provided a visible link to the nation's history and values. Whatever challenges the day might bring, he was prepared to face them with the same unwavering discipline that had defined the Queen's Guards for generations. The stage was set for events that would test not only his training, but also his understanding of duty, protocol, and the complex hierarchy of military command. The black sedan pulled up to the palace gates with an air of authority that immediately caught the attention of everyone present. From behind the tinted windows emerged General Richardson, a man whose reputation preceded him wherever he went. At 58 years old, he carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to having his orders followed without question. His chest displayed an impressive array of medals and ribbons, each representing campaigns and achievements that had shaped his distinguished military career. General Richardson had served in conflicts across 3 continents, from the deserts of Afghanistan to peacekeeping missions in the Balkans. His rise through the ranks had been swift and decisive, earning him respect and in some circles fear among those who served under him. He was known for his sharp tactical mind, his intolerance for inefficiency, and his unwavering belief that military hierarchy should be absolute in all circumstances. As he stepped out of the vehicle, his aide-de-camp quickly moved to his side, carrying a briefcase containing classified documents related to their visit. The general's purpose at the palace that day involved high-level discussions about military security protocols and potential changes to royal protection procedures. These were matters of national importance that required coordination between various branches of the armed forces. The general's eyes immediately swept across the palace grounds, taking in every detail with the practiced gaze of a military strategist. He noted the positions of the guards, the layout of the security measures, and the general state of readiness that surrounded the royal residence. His mind automatically began analyzing potential improvements and identifying areas where protocols might be enhanced. Marcus, from his position at the main entrance, observed the general's arrival but maintained his stoic composure. He had been briefed about various high-ranking officials who might visit, though specific details about their missions were typically kept confidential. The appearance of such a senior officer suggested that important matters were being discussed. Within the palace walls, General Richardson had built his career on the principle that orders flowed down through the chain of command and were executed without debate or hesitation. This philosophy had served him well in combat situations where split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death. He expected the same level of immediate compliance in all military contexts, regardless of the specific circumstances or traditions involved. The general's reputation extended beyond his tactical abilities. He was known throughout the military establishment as someone who demanded perfection and would not tolerate what he perceived as unnecessary ceremonial restrictions that might interfere with practical security measures. His approach to military service was rooted in efficiency and adaptability, rather than adherence to historical traditions. As he walked toward the palace entrance, General Richardson's attention was drawn to the positioning of the guards. In his assessment, their ceremonial stance, while impressive for tourists and tradition, might not be optimal for actual security purposes. His military mind began formulating ideas about how these positions could be modified to better serve protective functions while maintaining their symbolic importance. The general's aide struggled to keep pace with his commanding officer's brisk stride. Colonel Henderson, a career staff officer, had worked with General Richardson for several years and had learned to anticipate his demanding nature. He carried detailed files about the palace's current security, arrangements and proposed modifications that the general intended to discuss during his visit. Marcus noticed the general's approach but remained focused on his duty. The training he had received emphasized that guards should acknowledge high-ranking officials with appropriate respect while maintaining their primary responsibility to their posts. The protocols were clear about how to interact with various levels of military leadership while preserving the dignity and effectiveness of the ceremonial guard duties. General Richardson's visit was part of a broader military review that had been commissioned following recent global security concerns. The changing nature of threats to high-profile targets required constant evaluation and adaptation of protective measures. The general's expertise in modern military tactics made him a valuable consultant in developing enhanced security protocols for royal properties. The weight of the general's expectations was evident in his posture and demeanor. Throughout his career, he had commanded thousands of soldiers and had never encountered a situation where his authority was questioned or his orders were not immediately implemented. His understanding of military culture was based on clear hierarchies and unambiguous chains of command. As the general moved closer to the main entrance where Marcus stood guard, the convergence of two different military traditions was about to unfold. On one side stood a representative of ceremonial military service, bound by centuries of protocol and tradition. On the other approached a modern military commander accustomed to practical adaptability and immediate responsiveness to changing circumstances. The palace staff who observed the general's arrival recognized the significance of his visit. Security coordinators had been preparing for weeks to accommodate his requirements, while ensuring that normal palace operations continued smoothly. The balance between traditional ceremonial functions and modern security needs was always delicate, requiring careful coordination and mutual respect between different military units. General Richardson's previous experiences had not included extensive interaction with ceremonial military units. His career had been focused on operational commands where flexibility and rapid response were paramount. The rigid protocols that governed ceremonial duties were foreign to his practical approach to military service, though he understood their historical and symbolic importance. The morning sun reflected off the general's polished insignia as he approached the entrance, his confident stride indicating his expectation that his presence would be acknowledged with the deference typically accorded to his rank. The stage was being set for an encounter that would challenge both traditional protocol and modern military hierarchy, testing the boundaries between ceremonial duty and operational command authority. The moment arrived with the suddenness of a thunderclap on a clear day. General Richardson approached Marcus's position with the confidence of a man accustomed to having doors opened before he reached them. His stride never faltered as he expected the ceremonial guard to step aside and acknowledge his rank with appropriate deference. In his experience, military protocol was universal, and rank commanded immediate recognition regardless of the specific context or assignment. "Guard, step aside," the general commanded in a voice that had directed troops through countless operations. His tone carried the weight of decades of authority and the expectation of instant compliance. The command was delivered as a matter of routine, the same way he might instruct a sentry at any military installation to clear the way for a senior officer's passage. Marcus heard the command clearly, but his training and the sacred nature of his duty created an immediate conflict. The protocols governing the Queen's Guards were specific and unwavering. His position was not simply a military posting that could be abandoned at the request of any passing officer, regardless of rank. The ceremonial guard positions were governed by centuries of tradition and explicit orders that could only be countermanded by his direct chain of command. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Marcus remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed straight ahead, his rifle held in the precise position prescribed by regulations. His breathing remained controlled, though internally he felt the tension of the moment. Every fiber of his training told him to maintain his post, while also respecting military hierarchy, creating a situation that had no easy resolution. General Richardson's expression shifted from expectation to surprise, then quickly to irritation. In his entire military career, he had never encountered a soldier who failed to respond immediately to a direct command from a superior officer. The concept that a lower-ranking soldier would remain motionless in the face of a general's order was so foreign to his experience that he initially questioned whether the guard had actually heard him. "Soldier. I gave you an order," the general repeated, his voice rising slightly with the edge of authority that had intimidated countless subordinates throughout his career. He stepped closer to Marcus, his presence imposing and his expectation of compliance absolute. The general's understanding of military discipline was rooted in immediate obedience, and this apparent defiance challenged everything he believed about proper military conduct. Marcus faced a crisis that his training had prepared him for in theory, but experiencing in reality proved far more challenging. The Queen's Guards were taught that their duty to their post superseded all other considerations, except direct orders from their own command structure. They were specifically instructed that their ceremonial duties could not be interrupted by external requests, even from high-ranking officials from other units. The growing tension attracted the attention of palace staff and other security personnel, who began to observe the confrontation from a respectful distance. Word quickly spread through the palace communication network that an unusual situation was developing at the main entrance. The incident was unprecedented in recent memory, and no one was quite sure how it should be resolved. General Richardson's military philosophy was being challenged in a way he had never experienced. Throughout his career, his authority had been absolute within his sphere of command. The idea that a private could legitimately refuse his order, even based on different protocols, struck at the core of his understanding of military hierarchy and discipline. Marcus could feel the weight of everyone's attention, but his training held firm. The Queen's Guards were taught that their primary loyalty was to their post and their sovereign, not to the broader military hierarchy. Their unique position within the British military system gave them specific protections and responsibilities that differed from standard military units. The general's aide-de-camp watched nervously, recognizing that the situation was escalating beyond normal protocol disputes. Colonel Henderson had witnessed his commanding officer's frustration in various circumstances, but never in a context where military authority itself was being questioned. He hesitated to intervene, unsure whether his involvement would help or further complicate the situation. Other guards at nearby positions maintained their own stoic composure while internally processing the unprecedented confrontation. They understood Marcus's position perfectly, as they had all received the same training and sworn the same oaths. The solidarity among the Queen's Guards was unspoken but absolute, rooted in their shared commitment to their unique duties. General Richardson's face began to show signs of the anger that was building within him. His military career had been built on the foundation of clear hierarchies and immediate obedience. The apparent defiance he was witnessing challenged not only his personal authority but his entire understanding of how military organizations should function. The palace security coordinators who observed the situation faced their own dilemma. They recognized the legitimacy of both the general's expectation and the guard's duty, but had no clear protocol for resolving such conflicts. The intersection of ceremonial traditions and modern military hierarchy had created a situation that existing procedures had not anticipated. Marcus remained steadfast in his position, drawing strength from his training and his understanding of his sworn duty. The oath he had taken when joining the Queen's Guards was specific and sacred, binding him to his post in ways that transcended normal military hierarchies. His commitment to these principles would be tested in the moments to come as the confrontation continued to intensify. The standoff had reached a critical point where neither party could easily back down without losing face or compromising their principles. The general's authority was being challenged in an unprecedented way, while Marcus's dedication to his ceremonial duties was being tested by the most senior military officer he had ever encountered in the line of duty. The confrontation reached its peak when General Richardson, his face now flushed with anger and disbelief, made a decision that would haunt him for years to come. His voice carried across the courtyard as he declared loudly enough for everyone within hearing distance to understand his position. "This is insubordination of the highest order. I am a general in Her Majesty's Armed Forces, and no private will ignore my direct commands." The general's military mind, accustomed to swift, decisive action, led him to a course that seemed logical from his perspective but catastrophic in its actual implementation. He reached for his mobile phone with the intention of calling his contacts within the military hierarchy to resolve what he perceived as an unacceptable breach of military discipline. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he prepared to escalate the situation to the highest levels of command. Marcus maintained his position with unwavering determination, though he could sense the gravity of the situation, escalating far beyond what anyone had anticipated. His training had prepared him for difficult circumstances, but the public nature of this confrontation and the seniority of the officer involved created unprecedented pressure. Every principle he had learned about duty, honor, and service was being tested in real time. Within minutes, General Richardson was connected to the office of the Chief of Defense Staff, the highest-ranking military position in the United Kingdom. His complaint was delivered with the passion of a career officer whose authority had been challenged in the most public and humiliating way possible. He demanded immediate action to discipline the insubordinate guard and establish clear protocols that would prevent such incidents in the future. The response from the Chief of Defense Staff's office was not what General Richardson had expected. Instead of immediate support and promises of disciplinary action, he encountered a careful explanation of the unique status and responsibilities of the Queen's Guards. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to someone who understood the intricate balance between different military traditions and the specific protocols that governed ceremonial duties. General Richardson, came the measured response. The Queen's Guards operate under specific protocols that have been established through centuries of tradition and are codified in current military regulations. Their primary duty is to their post and cannot be superseded by external commands unless specifically authorized through their direct chain of command. The explanation continued with details that General Richardson had never encountered in his operational military experience. The Queen's Guards, while part of the broader military structure, maintained a unique position that gave them both special responsibilities and specific protections. Their ceremonial duties were considered sacred trusts that could not be interrupted or modified except under extraordinary circumstances and through proper channels. General Richardson's confident demeanor began to crack as the full implications of the situation became clear. The officer on the phone explained that the guard's actions were not only appropriate, but required under the regulations governing his position. Any deviation from these protocols would actually constitute a breach of duty that could result in serious disciplinary action against the guard himself. The conversation that followed was perhaps the most humbling of General Richardson's distinguished career. He learned that his attempt to command a Queen's Guard to abandon his post violated several protocols and demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of the ceremonial military structure. The Chief of Defense Staff's office made it clear that the general owed the guard an apology, rather than disciplinary action. Marcus, still maintaining his position, could not hear the phone conversation but could observe the dramatic change in General Richardson's demeanor. The confident, commanding presence that had approached his post was gradually being replaced by someone who appeared increasingly uncomfortable and uncertain. The general's body language shifted from aggressive authority to defensive confusion. The tourists and palace staff who had gathered to observe the confrontation witnessed a remarkable transformation. General Richardson, who had arrived with such commanding presence and absolute certainty about his authority, was now receiving what appeared to be a very different perspective on the situation from his superiors. His face showed the progression from anger to confusion to the dawning realization of his mistake. Colonel Henderson, the general's aide-de-camp, watched with growing concern as his commanding officer's confident stance dissolved into what appeared to be embarrassment. The phone conversation continued for several more minutes, during which General Richardson said very little and listened with increasing discomfort to explanations that clearly contradicted his assumptions about the situation. The palace security coordinators who had been monitoring the situation began to relax as it became apparent that the conflict was being resolved through proper channels. They had been prepared to intervene if necessary, but the military hierarchy was handling the matter internally, which was the most appropriate resolution for all parties involved. Other Queen's Guards at their posts throughout the palace grounds maintained their ceremonial composure while internally processing the vindication of their colleagues' actions. The incident served as a powerful reminder of the importance of their specific training and the unique nature of their duties within the broader military structure. When General Richardson finally ended the phone call, his entire demeanor had changed completely. The commanding officer who had arrived with such certainty about his authority now faced the reality that he had fundamentally misunderstood the situation and had inappropriately challenged a soldier who was actually performing his duties correctly. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of recognition and regret. General Richardson stood before Marcus, who continued to maintain his perfect ceremonial stance, and realized that his next actions would determine how this incident would be remembered and what lessons would be learned from this unprecedented confrontation between different traditions within the military hierarchy. The transformation in General Richardson's demeanor was immediate and profound. The phone call had stripped away every assumption he had held about the situation, leaving him standing before Marcus with the uncomfortable realization that he had made a serious error in judgment. The confident military commander, who had approached the palace gates, had been replaced by someone grappling with the humbling experience of being corrected by his own superiors in the most public way possible. General Richardson's face showed the visible progression of emotions as the full weight of his mistake settled upon him. The flush of anger that had colored his features was replaced by the pallor of embarrassment and genuine regret. For a man who had built his career on decisive action and unwavering confidence, the experience of being so thoroughly wrong about a fundamental military protocol was devastating to his professional pride. Marcus remained at his post, maintaining the same perfect posture and unwavering focus that had characterized his stance throughout the entire confrontation. His training had prepared him for this moment, though he could never have imagined the specific circumstances that would test his resolve. The validation of his actions through the proper military channels strengthened his commitment to the principles that had guided his decision. The general took a deep breath and stepped closer to Marcus, his approach now completely different from his earlier commanding advance. Where before he had moved with the expectation of immediate compliance, he now approached with the careful respect of someone who had learned an important lesson about assumptions and authority. The change in his body language was apparent to everyone who observed the interaction. "Private Thompson," General Richardson began, his voice notably softer and lacking the commanding edge that had characterized his earlier orders. He had learned Marcus's name during the phone conversation with his superiors, along with much more information about the young soldier's exemplary service record and the specific nature of his duties. The personal connection made the situation more meaningful, and the general's regret more genuine. The apology that followed was unlike anything the assembled observers had ever witnessed. General Richardson, a man accustomed to receiving deference and respect from subordinates, publicly acknowledged his error with a sincerity that surprised everyone present. "I owe you an apology, soldier. I failed to understand the unique nature of your duties and inappropriately challenged your commitment to your post." Marcus, while maintaining his ceremonial stance, acknowledged the general's words with the slightest nod that protocol allowed. The recognition from such a senior officer, particularly in the form of an apology, was unprecedented in his experience as a Queen's Guard. The moment represented not only personal vindication but validation of the principles and traditions that governed his service. "General," Richardson continued his apology with words that would be remembered by everyone present for years to come. "Your dedication to your duty, even when challenged by someone of my rank, demonstrates the highest qualities of military service. The traditions you represent and protect are more important than my convenience or even my authority in this context." The gathered crowd of palace staff, security personnel, and even some tourists who had witnessed portions of the confrontation watched in amazement as the military hierarchy publicly corrected itself. The incident had become an impromptu lesson in the complexity of military traditions and the importance of understanding different roles within the broader structure of military service. Colonel Henderson, the general's aide-de-camp, observed his commanding officer's apology with a mixture of admiration and concern. He had never seen General Richardson acknowledge an error so publicly or with such genuine humility. The incident would undoubtedly affect how the general approached similar situations in the future and would serve as a powerful reminder about the dangers of assumptions. The general's Education about the Queen's Guards continued as he reflected on what he had learned during the phone conversation with his superiors. These soldiers were not merely ceremonial figures but active military personnel, with specific training and responsibilities that extended far beyond their public appearances. Their unwavering commitment to their posts was not stubbornness but essential duty. Marcus felt a profound sense of satisfaction, not from the general's discomfort but from the validation of his training and principles. The moment represented everything he had been taught about duty, honor, and the importance of maintaining standards even under pressure. His grandfather's stories about military service and the importance of standing firm in one's convictions had guided him through this test. The incident had also provided an education for everyone present about the intricate nature of military protocols and the importance of understanding different traditions within the armed forces. The Queen's Guards operated under unique circumstances that required special knowledge and respect from other military units, something that had not been widely understood outside their immediate sphere. General Richardson's final words to Marcus carried the weight of genuine respect and hard-earned understanding. Your service honors the crown and reflects the highest traditions of military duty. I thank you for your dedication and your patience with my ignorance of your protocols. The formal nature of his words emphasized his genuine regret and his newfound appreciation for the ceremonial military traditions. As General Richardson stepped back from Marcus's position, his entire approach to the situation had been transformed. The commanding officer, who had arrived expecting immediate compliance, had been educated about the complexity and importance of ceremonial military duties. The lesson he had learned would influence his interactions with all ceremonial military units for the remainder of his career. The aftermath of the confrontation left everyone involved with a deeper understanding of military traditions and the importance of respecting different roles within the broader structure of military service. The incident would be discussed and remembered as an example of how assumptions can lead to mistakes, and how genuine leadership requires the humility to acknowledge and learn from those mistakes. The news of the confrontation spread through military circles with surprising speed, carried by witnesses and transmitted through official channels until it reached the highest levels of military command. What had begun as a simple misunderstanding between a general and a ceremonial guard had evolved into a significant lesson about military traditions and the importance of understanding different roles within the armed forces structure. General Richardson found himself at the center of discussions he had never anticipated. Senior officers who had heard about the incident reached out to him with a mixture of support and gentle education about ceremonial military protocols. Many admitted that they too had been unaware of the specific regulations governing the Queen's Guards and their unique position within the military hierarchy. The general's reputation, rather than being damaged by his mistake, was actually enhanced by his gracious handling of the correction. Military leaders throughout the United Kingdom noted his willingness to publicly acknowledge his error and his respectful treatment of Private Thompson after learning about the true nature of the situation. His humility in the face of his mistake was seen as a mark of genuine leadership. Marcus continued his duties with renewed confidence and pride. The incident had tested every aspect of his training and commitment, and he had passed that test with distinction. His fellow Queen's Guards spoke of the confrontation with quiet pride, knowing that one of their own had upheld the traditions and protocols that defined their service under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The story reached the attention of the royal household, who expressed their appreciation for Marcus's unwavering dedication to his duties. The incident reinforced the importance of the ceremonial guards and their role in maintaining the dignity and traditions of the monarchy. The Queen herself was briefed on the situation and reportedly expressed satisfaction with the guards' conduct. Within the Queen's Guards regiment, Marcus became something of a legend. His calm maintenance of protocol under extreme pressure was cited as an example of the highest standards of ceremonial military service. Training instructors began using the incident as a case study in how to handle unexpected challenges while remaining true to one's duties and obligations. General Richardson's education about ceremonial military traditions continued well beyond the initial incident. He made it a point to study the history and protocols of various ceremonial units throughout the British military system. His newfound knowledge led him to become an advocate for better understanding and communication between operational and ceremonial military branches. The general implemented changes in his own command structure to ensure that his officers understood the unique roles and responsibilities of different military units. He established protocols for interaction with ceremonial troops and made certain that his staff received education about the various traditions and regulations that governed different aspects of military service. Marcus's family in Yorkshire learned about the incident through military channels and expressed immense pride in their son's conduct. His grandfather, the World War II veteran, was particularly moved by the story and spoke proudly to neighbors about his grandson's commitment to duty and tradition. The family's military legacy had been honored in an unexpected but meaningful way. The incident also sparked broader discussions within military education institutions about the importance of understanding the full spectrum of military service. Academy curricula were expanded to include more comprehensive coverage of ceremonial duties and the unique protocols that governed different military units throughout the United Kingdom. Colonel Henderson, General Richardson's aide-de-camp, used the experience as a learning opportunity for his own career development. He studied the various ceremonial military traditions and made certain that his general was fully briefed on protocols before any future visits to ceremonial military installations. The incident had taught him the importance of thorough preparation and understanding context. The tourists who had witnessed portions of the confrontation and its resolution spread their own versions of the story, often emphasizing the impressive discipline and dedication of the Queen's Guards. Social media posts and travel blogs featured accounts of the incident, generally praising the professionalism and commitment of the ceremonial soldiers. General Richardson's approach to leadership was permanently changed by the experience. He began each new assignment by ensuring that he understood the specific traditions and protocols of the units he would be working with. His willingness to learn and adapt became a hallmark of his leadership style and earned him respect throughout the military community. The palace security coordinators implemented new briefing procedures for visiting military officials, ensuring that future visits would include comprehensive education about ceremonial protocols and the unique roles of different military units stationed at royal properties. The goal was to prevent similar misunderstandings while maintaining the respect and dignity appropriate to all military traditions. Marcus's conduct during the incident was formally recognized through military channels, though he remained characteristically modest about the attention his actions had received. His commitment to duty had been tested under extraordinary circumstances, and his unwavering adherence to protocol had protected both his own integrity and the traditions of his unit. The lasting impact of the confrontation extended far beyond the immediate participants. Throughout the British military system, the incident became a reminder of the importance of understanding and respecting the diverse traditions and responsibilities that characterized different military units. The story served as an example of how apparent conflicts could be resolved through proper education and mutual respect, leading to stronger relationships between different branches of military service. Years later, the incident at Buckingham Palace had become part of military folklore, told and retold in officer training schools and ceremonial military units throughout the Commonwealth. The story of General Richardson and Private Marcus Thompson had evolved into a powerful teaching tool about duty, humility, and the importance of understanding military traditions in all their diverse forms. Marcus had advanced in his career, eventually becoming a sergeant in the Queen's Guards, and later transferring to an operational unit where his experience and leadership qualities were highly valued. His reputation as a soldier who understood both duty and diplomacy made him a sought-after instructor for military personnel who would be working in ceremonial contexts. The incident that had tested his resolve as a young private had shaped his entire approach to military service. General Richardson, now retired from active duty, often spoke at military academies about leadership, humility, and the importance of continuous learning throughout one's career. The confrontation with Marcus had become his most frequently cited example of how assumptions could lead to mistakes, and how true leadership required the courage to acknowledge when one was wrong. His willingness to share the story publicly had made it a valuable educational tool. The relationship between General Richardson and Marcus had evolved into mutual respect and occasional correspondence. They had met several times at military functions, where their shared experience had created an unlikely but meaningful professional friendship. Both men understood that their encounter had taught them important lessons that had influenced their subsequent careers. The British military had implemented formal education programs about ceremonial military traditions, partly inspired by the incident at Buckingham Palace. Officer training now included comprehensive coverage of the various ceremonial units and their unique protocols, ensuring that future military leaders would be prepared for interactions with different types of military service members. Marcus often reflected on that pivotal day when his training and principles had been tested so dramatically. The confrontation had occurred during his third year as a Queen's Guard, at a time when he was still establishing his identity as a military professional. The incident had given him confidence in his judgment and reinforced his commitment to the values that had guided his decision to maintain his post. The Queen's Guards Regiment had incorporated the story into their own training programs, using it as an example of how to maintain protocol and dignity under extreme pressure. New guards were taught about the incident as part of their education, about the unique responsibilities and protections that came with their ceremonial duties. Marcus's conduct had become the standard, against which similar situations were measured. General Richardson's legacy in the military community was enhanced, rather than diminished by his gracious handling of his mistake. Senior officers frequently cited his example when discussing the importance of humility and continuous learning in leadership positions. His willingness to acknowledge his error and learn from it had demonstrated qualities that many considered essential to effective military leadership. The incident had also influenced palace security, protocols and procedures for handling visiting military officials. Comprehensive briefings were now standard practice, ensuring that all visitors understood the specific roles and responsibilities of the various military units stationed at royal properties. The goal was to maintain respect for all military traditions while preventing misunderstandings. Marcus's family continued to take pride in his conduct during the confrontation and his subsequent military career. His grandfather had lived to see his grandson commended for his service, and the family military tradition had been honored in a way that none of them could have anticipated. The values of duty and honor that had been passed down through generations had guided Marcus through his most challenging moment. The tourist industry around Buckingham Palace had even benefited from the incident, as guides now often told versions of the story to illustrate the dedication and training of the Queen's Guards. The incident had become part of the palace's unofficial history, demonstrating the serious military commitment that lay behind the ceremonial appearances of the guards. General Richardson's post-retirement activities included consulting, work with various military organizations, where his experience and hard-earned wisdom about military traditions made him a valuable advisor. His understanding of both operational and ceremonial military roles had been deepened by his encounter with Marcus, making him uniquely qualified to help bridge gaps between different military communities. The broader impact of the incident on military culture had been subtle but significant. Throughout the British Armed Forces, there was increased awareness of and respect for the diverse traditions and responsibilities that characterized different military units. The story had become a reminder that military service took many forms, all of which deserved understanding and respect. As Marcus continued his military career, he carried with him the lessons learned from that dramatic day at Buckingham Palace. The incident had tested his understanding of duty, honor, and service in ways that no training exercise could have replicated. His unwavering commitment to his principles had been vindicated, and his respectful handling of a difficult situation had established his reputation as a soldier of exceptional character. The story of the confrontation between General Richardson and Private Marcus Thompson had become a lasting testament to the importance of understanding, respect, and humility in military service. Their encounter had begun with conflict, but had evolved into a powerful example of how apparent disagreements could be resolved through proper channels and mutual respect, creating stronger relationships and better understanding between different military traditions and the dedicated people who served them.